It begins with a moment that shouldn't exist. The magazine runs dry, but the fire doesn't stop. What follows isn't just power. It's a slow unraveling of everything fights used to demand from you. Timing fades, caution dissolves, the rhythm of combat breaks, and reforms around a single, relentless power. With the Bullet King in your hands, pressure never lifts. Enemies don't recover, fights don't reset. Every second feeds the next, building into something heavier, louder, and impossible to ignore. At first, it feels like control, but quickly becomes something else. A growing hunger for more damage, more targets, more moments where the battlefield bends to your will. You no longer wait for openings, you create them. You don't manage fights, you overwhelm them. Because once you've felt what it's like to never stop firing, everything else feels like holding back. But endless fire is only the beginning, because even chaos has its limits, if nothing feeds into it. The longer the trigger stays down, the heavier it all becomes. Not just louder, not just faster, but stronger. Every round lands and leaves something behind. A trace, a weight, a pull on the fight itself. You feel it before you can explain it. Enemies don't just fall, they get wiped. Armor doesn't just break, it disappears. What used to take time now barely has a chance. This is where the scales begin to tip. Not in bursts, not in moments, but in a steady, irreversible, endless rain of fire. With tipping scales, the fire you sustain starts feeding back into you. Each second without stopping becomes an investment. Each target caught in the bullet hell adds something that refuses to slow down. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is for anything to stand against it. What about the pros, cons, and simple truth? The real strength of the Bullet King, plus the tipping skills, is what happens when the fight doesn't stop. No reloads means constant pressure, and tipping skills turns that into something far more dangerous. The longer you hold the trigger, the more your damage builds, stacking into a flow where enemies don't get a chance to recover. It starts steady, but once it ramps up, it doesn't just keep up with the fight, it takes it over. The downside happens before the flow gets a chance to take over. Early in fights, before anything has a chance to build up, you're at your most vulnerable. And anytime you're forced to stop firing, reposition, or lose line of sight of targets, the scaling drops off rather fast. This isn't the burst build that saves you in tight moments, it relies on continuity. If the fight interrupts you, the build feels it immediately. In the end, this setup is all about momentum. If you can stay on the trigger and keep pressure alive, it becomes overwhelming fast. But if you can't maintain that rhythm, it struggles to keep pace. It's not just about having endless fire, it's about making every second of it count. So what about the actual build? Let's break down the specifics of each piece, going over the Bullet King, tipping skills, and our remaining pieces to take full advantage of the combo. Let's start with our primary weapon in this build, the Bullet King. But how does it work? When looking at the stats, it states the weapon has a 130 round magazine. But that's not really what's going on here. And that's exactly what makes this weapon as good as it is for the build we're setting up. That's because of the talent Bullet Hell, which makes it so that this weapon never has to be reloaded. And for every 100 rounds that hit an enemy, you replenish some ammo to you and your allies' reserves. But where or how can you get the Bullet King? The weapon has been added to the general exotic loot pool, meaning you can get one from any source of exotic drops. One of the easiest ways of farming exotics is by doing your priority objectives focused on exotic items, enabling you to get multiple drops an hour. But of course, this is RNG dependent and can be quite a pain if this is the only exotic you're looking for. Luckily, there's another way, shrinking the large exotic pool to just 4, and that's by doing retaliations, specifically the Rikers ones, because it has an increased drop chance from named Rikers bosses, but also the option to get the blueprint after you wipe out a kill squad during the retaliation. Higher difficulty means higher drop chances. Having trouble finding what you're looking for, weapons, gear, or just putting it all together? Join the Discord and we can help you build, grind, or just play together. To make full advantage of the weapon and the talent, we need something that feeds directly into the consistency of never reloading. And that's precisely where the tipping skill set comes into play. This DPS set focuses primarily on LMGs, as continuous shooting and suppressive fire builds up stacks that enhance an agent's weapon handling and critical hit damage. Let's go over the bonuses. The set bonus for 2 pieces gives you plus 30% larger magazine size. Set bonus for 3 pieces gives you plus 30% LMG damage. The set bonus for 4 pieces unlocks the talent Throttle Control, and makes it so that shooting builds stacks to a max of 50. Each stack provides 0.5% weapon handling and plus 4% critical hit damage. while losing 6 stacks per second while not shooting, and no stacks are lost if an enemy is suppressed. And while these bonuses seem really good in combination with the Bullet King, it gets even better if you add the backpack and chest armor from the tipping skill set. That's because the backpack gives you the talent Snowball, and it increases throttle control, critical hit damage per stack from 4% to 7%. And the chest provides the talent Sustainability, which increases throttle control maximum number of stacks from 50 to 75. This makes it so that every bullet you fire gains a stack up to 75, and at full stacks provides you 75 times 7% critical hit damage, for a total of 525% extra critical hit damage. While keeping up those stacks is easy because reloading isn't even on the menu. A good thing to know is that the stacks build based on a fixed timer while shooting, giving 5 stacks per second you fire your weapon, and is not related to RPM. So what can we add to make the most out of all that critical hit damage? First of all, we need to make sure we get a crit chance above the threshold of 50% to ensure we can hit as many critical hit shots as possible. 60% being the max, so try and get it somewhere between the 50 and 60% mark. To help get it there, we need the Kneepads from Ceska, because the one-piece bonus gives us an extra 8% critical hit chance. We still have the minor attributes on top of that, also providing crit chance and crit damage. And for the final piece, the Contractor gloves, which for the one-piece bonus gives us plus 10% LMG damage. And another big addition is in the minor attributes, giving us more crit chance, but also a multiplicative source of damage, being 8% damage to armor. Another solid option would be the salvo holster from Unit Alloys. Thanks to this piece, you'll get 10% extra rate of fire. When you make the switch here, keep in mind you stay close as possible to the 60% crit chance and not switch the chest or backpack. As for the specialization, we'll be using Gunner, which provides the Banshee pools. This skill is super easy to hit multiple enemies, has a short cooldown, and stuns every enemy you hit. Most builds use it to start a gameplay loop, but not for this build. We use it as a protective layer when rushers are getting too close. Use the Banshee pools to stun and either kill fast if you have your stacks going, or reposition and use the newfound space to take them out. Another benefit is plus 10% armor on kill, adding survivability, which is always welcome. Since this build is about shooting a lot, the perk about generating 10% ammo every 60 seconds is really nice to have. One thing to keep in mind, all specializations also add 15% weapon damage. Don't forget to respec into this and missing out on the damage. For this build specific, use the points in LMG for that 15% extra output. To make things easy, here's a build overview, starting from the top. Gunner specialization for the Banshee pools, 10% armor on kills, and ammo regeneration. Good thing to know when looking at the weapons and gear pieces, nothing has been leveled up through the expertise system, meaning an extra 30% weapon damage and a lot of armor is still to be added. For the main weapon, the exotic LMG, the Bullet King, so we never have to reload again, build stacks, and maintain them as easily as possible. Secondary, Stack Broker, including the talent Back and Forth, for that extra burst with damage and rate of fire when swapping. The biggest surprise in the build is the sidearm. Yes, the Quick Step. I always go for the speed boost if builds are not dependent on a sidearm for damage. Tipping skills gear set with the mask, chest, backpack, and holster, including the chest and backpack talents for higher damage per stack and increasing the total amounts of stack possible. Increasing crit damage at maximum stacks for another 325% on top of the normal 200% without the chest and backpack. Totaling crit damage at full stacks at 629% crit hit damage. For the gloves, the Contractor's gloves, adding 8% multiplicative damage to armor. And our final piece, the Ceska Kneepads, adds more crit chance to take full advantage of the tipping skills bonus. Or switch this one to a tipping skills Kneepad, and the holster to a Zalfa holster for extra rate of fire. For the cores, we have 4 red cores and 2 blue cores. This is good for most content out there, but what I would do is going up in difficulty, and especially when playing in a team, is going for full red cores to maximize your damage output and keeping pressure from the backline. And lastly, the skills. The Reviver Hive, providing the last edge for safety and consistency. And for the second skill, the Banshee pools. Use this for protection when you get pushed. All stats combined will look like this. For 59% crit chance and 104% crit damage. This does increase with 525% at full stacks from tipping skills, totaling over 600% crit damage. As you know by now, this is just one way to run it. It's a very strong starting point, but the real power comes from adjusting it to your own playstyle and what you enjoy running. No build should feel copy-paste. So I'd love to hear how you've tweaked it to fit your setup. Drop it in the comments and share what's working for you. And if you get stuck or want to take it further, jump into the Discord. There's always people around to help, break things down, and run it with you. Else, I'll see you in the next one.